A name you haven't heard in years resurfaces a piece of evidence, forgotten for nearly 2 decades, now comes to light, and it could change everything in the Madeleine McCann case. Today, we're going to reveal this new evidence, why this suspect was never truly left behind. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and sense something's missing, even if you can't quite put your finger on it? That's how the Madeleine case left so many people, full of pieces. But, strangely, the central picture never came into focus. For years, a name stayed out of the spotlight, hidden among distractions, sensational headlines, and media twists, almost forgotten, even by the police. Now, a new piece of evidence emerges, not a rumor, a hunch, or a social media whisper. It's solid, concrete, resurfacing with force and making us wonder, how could someone who might have been a key figure simply vanish from the map? You won't find this on the front pages of newspapers, but it's right here, in front of your eyes. There's a heavy silence around this name, a name that stayed in the shadows while we focused on other theories, other suspects maybe, because if someone was guilty, it was easier to let the suspect disappear, right? And for decades that's what happened. The name popped up in sparse reports, old notes, random scribbles, but it never took center stage. Now this name is back, with evidence that ties the suspect to the crime in an unexpected way. It reveals that maybe the spotlight was aimed at the wrong places on purpose. This is an invitation for you to look at this empty frame and feel the echo of something nearly buried. While we celebrated twists and wallowed in media narratives, there was a hole in the investigation, a hole through which the real suspect might have slipped. Imagine being a family waiting for justice, day after day, and watching the attention fade without answers, without a reopening, just silence. This void carries weight. It's the weight of a name that was never cleared nor formally accused, just hidden. It breeds frustration, fear, even guilt. Did we play a part in this? Forgetting this pain is quiet, but real. It's the pain of everyone who depends on the investigation to survive the absence. Today, we're going to open this empty frame and fill it with facts no one wanted to see. This isn't just another Madeleine story. It's about the name no one wanted to investigate, and that's now back with force. If you want to understand what really happened, subscribe and stick with me to the end, because losing focus might have cost more than anyone imagined. For a long time, the Madeleine case was described as a maze. People coming and going as if it were a game of versions, speculations, one-day headlines. But at the center of it all, there was always a void, a hole no one filled, and a name that, little by little, vanished from the map, not because it was proven innocent, but because they stopped looking at it. Christian Bruckner. Maybe you don't even remember this name anymore. It came up strongly in 2020, when German police pointed to him as the prime suspect in Madeleine's disappearance. They said he was in the Praia da Luz area on the night she vanished, that he had a history full of sexual crimes against children, that he lived in a van just minutes from where she was last seen. And yet, little by little, he faded from the narrative. The media backed off, the coverage cooled, and suddenly it was as if he'd never been there. No acquittal, no proof of innocence, just silence. In 2008, a crucial tip was ignored. An acquaintance of Bruckner named Helge went to the authorities and said the man had confessed something chilling, that he knew what had happened to Madeleine, that she would never be found. But this warning was shelved. Only in 2017, 9 years later, did someone decide to reopen the drawer and look into the shadow. But by then, it was too late. The trail had gone cold, and the prime suspect started being treated as an inconvenient detail, as if admitting he was still a valid piece of the puzzle was more painful than sticking to the comfortable version that everything had already been investigated. But now, the shadow is back, and it's not alone. Why would someone vanish from an investigation without ever being cleared? In June 2025, everything changed again. Suddenly, the police returned to a dam in Portugal, a place tied to the routes Bruckner used to take. Excavations, sniffer dogs, German teams, the world paying attention for the first time in a long while. And what they found, no one expected. Buried in the ground, alongside the remains of Bruckner's dog, were hard drives, videos, masks, children's clothing, objects that seemed straight out of a nightmare. The agents dug as if searching for traces and found fragments, bones, fabrics, disturbing recordings, all of it hidden under the body of a dead animal, as if burying the dog was also an attempt to bury secrets. Is this real? One of the forensic experts reportedly said, holding one of the devices. None of this was revealed with fanfare. German authorities are known for working in silence, but sources close to the case confirmed part of the material is being analyzed right now in a forensic lab. And if the connections to Madeleine are confirmed, this shadow that reappeared might drag an entire network of institutional silence with it. More than a suspect, Bruckner has become a test, a mirror, an uncomfortable reminder that justice too has comfort zones, that there are names that turn to smoke not for lack of evidence but for lack of will. And the worst part is that time is against everyone. Christian Bruckner is set to be released. His sentence for another crime, the rape of an elderly woman in Portugal, ends in September 2025. The prosecution is racing against the clock to secure a new warrant before then. But what if they don't make it? What if he walks free? What if we watch, once again, the prime suspect in one of the biggest disappearances of the century walk out of prison as if he were just another person? It's not just about what was buried, it's about everything they chose not to unearth. And now that the shadow is back, who will have the courage to look into it? At the heart of this bombshell is a piece of physical evidence that, for years, sat archived but never debunked. It's an item found in Christian Bruckner's trailer in Arlington, T. During searches conducted after Madeleine McCann's disappearance, the item, a piece of children's clothing, consistent with the description of the pajamas Madeleine was wearing the night she vanished. This item, according to internal German police records, was collected, photographed, and logged but never publicly linked to the case. The official claim is that there wasn't enough DNA for a definitive comparison. However, internal documents obtained by journalists indicate the clothing contained fibers consistent with others found in the apartment where Madeleine disappeared. Why wasn't this included in the main dossier? Why, despite signs of a connection, did Bruckner's name vanish from the investigation's focus for over a decade? At the same time, phone records show that on the night of the disappearance, Bruckner received a call just meters from the resort where Madeleine was last seen. These records were ignored until 2020, when the German prosecution reopened the line of investigation after public pressure and internal leaks. What emerges here isn't just a coincidence but a pattern of selective forgetting. Bruckner had a history of sexual crimes against minors. He was living illegally in Portugal in a van near the crime scene, and was reported multiple times by neighbors for suspicious behavior. And yet, for 13 years, his name didn't appear in the official investigation's final reports. The inevitable question: who diverted the spotlight, and why? Behind the scenes of the investigation, sources linked to Portugal's judiciary confirmed there was a kind of tacit agreement. Diplomatic pressure was immense, and continued cooperation between countries depended on not attributing serious failures to any foreign agency. In other words, Bruckner was an inconvenient and politically costly problem. The media, meanwhile, played an ambiguous role. Initially, Bruckner's name surfaced briefly in 2007, but it was quickly overshadowed by theories blaming Madeleine's parents. This shift in focus was heavily fueled by British tabloids, diverting attention from the prime suspect and distorting the public narrative. Later, it was discovered that Bruckner's laptop, seized by German police, contained thousands of child pornography files. Some of these files were of Portuguese origin, suggesting he may have operated there longer than previously thought. There are even indications he was investigated for other disappearances in the region, including that of Inga Gericke in Germany. So why, with such a history, did he remain outside the official narrative for so long? The pattern is clear. The truth didn't vanish, it was ignored. The silence around Bruckner's name wasn't an accident. It was a decision, a choice to keep the narrative under control, even if it meant hiding what mattered most. Now, with the case reopened and this evidence back on the table, Bruckner's name reappears not as a new suspect but as someone who never should have left the radar. And the question that lingers is simple but piercing: what if the truth never left the scene but everyone chose to look away? Sometimes, what hurts the most isn't what was lost, it's what was left aside for convenience. There are things only those who've paid attention from the start can see. And now that this piece is back on the board, maybe the shadow never left. It was just waiting for someone. Christian Bruckner was absent from the center of public discussion. He wasn't cleared, he wasn't charged, he simply disappeared from the conversation, as if not mentioning him was the same as him not being guilty. Now, with the recovered evidence, the piece of children's clothing, the phone records, the ignored history, what was once a vague suspicion takes solid shape. This evidence doesn't just demand technical review, it demands a stance. Germany's prosecution, pressured by media outlets and independent activists, has already publicly acknowledged there's enough evidence for well-founded suspicion. In practice, this means reopening interrogations, questioning decisions made nearly 2 decades ago, and maybe admitting the truth was always there, just hidden where no one wanted to look. The truth now imposes itself with the weight of someone silenced, and the system, so skilled at discrediting inconvenient versions, now has to answer, not to the media, but to the silence it helped create. Internal reactions show discomfort. Within Portugal's Polícia Judiciária, there are reports that agents who worked on the case in 2007 are reassessing decisions from that time. The term strategic error has been whispered more often than admitted, but we're not talking about an error here. We're talking about a deliberate choice to look away from the right direction because it was politically safer to blame. The parents blamed the chaos and not confront what really hurt. Meanwhile, families of other missing children in the region are now questioning whether their cases were also ignored due to similar connections. Madeleine's case, once seen as an isolated international sensation, is starting to take on the contours of something bigger, a network of omissions, a cycle of silences. And when a name like Bruckner's comes back into the light, it doesn't come alone. It carries the specter of everything that was ignored. The symbolic weight of a face that should have been in the dossiers from the start, but was kept out like a locked-away secret born of shame. This isn't just a legal issue, it's a moral wound, because interrupted justice can still be resumed, but forgotten justice becomes trauma. Now, investigators face what they avoided for years, the fact that the most obvious line of suspicion was suppressed, and the public, realizing this, is starting to shift its perception of the case. The blame, once projected onto the easiest targets the parents, the failures of the Portuguese police. The wildest theories now finds a fixed point, and at that point is a man with a history of violence, documented evidence, and a direct link to the scene of the disappearance. The shadow can no longer be ignored because it didn't grow. It was always there. They just diverted the light. The silent climax of this case isn't an arrest, nor a confession. It's the discomfort. It's the moment when the public humor realizes that what seemed like a lack of evidence was actually an excessive convenience. Maybe the hardest thing to accept is this. It's not that the truth didn't show up, it's that when it did, no one wanted to look. Not every shadow fades. Some just wait for enough courage to be seen. And now the question changes. It's no longer about who took Madeleine, it's about who tried to erase who might have always been there. Justice now doesn't just need to be done, it needs to be faced. And in this moment, each of us decides which side of the light we want to stand on. Some things hurt, not when they happen, but when we realize how much time passed without us doing anything. When a name comes back after years of silence, covered in institutional dust and convenient ignorance. It doesn't come alone, it brings everything that was swept away because it was too inconvenient. And that's why today, even after so many detours and so many versions hammered into consensus, I can't pretend none of this matters. Because what I saw, what I felt when I looked at this new evidence, when I saw this name that was forgotten, or rather, buried reservis almost silently, like a shadow that refuses to fade, was more than discomfort. That it was a scream caught in my throat. It was that feeling that justice sometimes doesn't fail for lack of evidence but for an excessive convenience. And if you've stayed with me this far, maybe you felt something similar. Because the truth is, Christian Bruckner wasn't cleared, he was forgotten. Or rather, he was surgically removed from the narrative, as if someone decided the investigation's focus needed to be elsewhere, in places easier to control, on names easier to bear. And now that time has passed, the spotlights have dimmed, world has moved on, and many don't even remember what they felt when they first saw that little face in the newspapers. Now that everything feels safer to touch, this name is back, and the question that won't quiet down is, why? Why? Only now. Why did they let so many years pass, so many versions pile up, so many mistakes get buried alongside the chance for justice? It's in these moments that I realize the problem isn't just the absence of truth, it's the deliberate choice not to face it because it hurts, because it disrupts, because it demands accountability, and that in the real world comes at a cost. But what if the cost of not facing it is even higher? What if what we lost in these years wasn't just time, but dignity? What if, by accepting the silence, we contributed to other victims emerging? Can you live with that doubt? Because I can't. I look at this case and see more than a procedural error. I see a pattern, a model that repeats itself every time power finds a way to protect itself, even if it costs lives, even if it costs memories, even if it costs the truth. And that's why this video doesn't end here, because if all we've done is rekindle memory, then we still need to do justice to it. And justice, in this case, isn't vengeance, isn't shouting, it's courage. Courage to look at what was left aside, to revisit the names that vanished without explanation, to ask again the questions that were never answered honestly. And if you feel even deep down that something in this case still pulses, then this video wasn't just information, that it was a call. And now I need to ask you something, not as someone making a plea, but as someone who sees you. If you feel that this name, Christian Bruckner, never should have left the agenda, if you think keeping him in the dark was a decision, not an oversight, then write like you're leaving a trail. Put in the comments, I haven't forgotten. And if you want to go further, if this hit you in a way that's hard to explain but you felt in your chest, then the super chat isn't just a donation, that's a sealed, silent signal that you were here, that you saw, that you care. Because those who send a super chat here aren't just spectators, they're part of the resistance against erasure. And believe me, in times like these, that's worth more than 1,000 likes. And if you want to keep going with me on this search, if you want to keep looking at the shadows still hiding truths, then subscribe. Not like someone signing up for a channel, but like someone joining a beacon, because there's more coming. And the next case will show you that fear sometimes is more effective than any lie, and that some stories can only be told when the pain has turned to a scar but still stings. Now, tell me, what stayed with you after all this? What part of this stuck and won't let go? Tell me. It can be in silence, it can be in words, but let it come from the heart, right? I'll read every line like someone listening to a whisper in the dark. And remember, not every silence is forgetting. I haven't forgotten.